We're here live at the Healthcare Interactive Conference in Las Vegas, Nevada, and I'm sitting down with my good friend David Feinberg.
Hey Chris, how you doing?
Good to see you again.
I
was just reminiscing right before we started. You were one of the first people we did these video calls.
And how many years was that ago?
I think we're now on 2 or 3 years of doing
Wow,
these.
that's great.
Yeah, and you're back again.
I'm back.
And because this year, you actually were a keynote presenter yesterday.
I know, can you believe it? Can you believe anybody would give me the responsibility of a keynote? Like
there were a lot of
Kathy
people in the
Divis and Mike Schneider and the great folks from Greystone did that, and it was really, really
Well,
really
we want to talk
exciting.
about some of the lessons that you learned, because that's
Sure.
actually what the topic was.
Happy to.
Yeah, but before we do, share a little bit about your background for those few people.
Part of my speech was from CPG to AMC, from consumer packaged goods to academic medical centers, from the back room to the boardroom, lessons learned from my experiences and mistakes. So I've been in this business, the healthcare side of things for almost just under 30 years. And so I wanted to use some of that background to share with folks who may not have experienced some of the interesting things, the quote industry challenges that I have, and hopefully to learn a little. And it was not even though this is a tech conference, it wasn't tech heavy. There was no heavy lifting. It was just, listen to these stories, and hopefully you can learn from some of the things I've learned from.
Well, I think some of the things that you brought forward, too, are important, because I always say the hardest thing about technology is not the technology itself, it's the people.
Sure.
And it's the people that are behind
That's
it.
so true. That's so true.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I want to lean in on one thing that you touched on briefly on stage, but I want to dig deeper with you on
Okay,
this,
sure.
Because nearly 30 years in this space.
Yeah.
You've seen a lot.
Yeah.
The industry has changed a lot.
A lot.
And there's been a lot of up and downs.
Absolutely.
And even personally, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned that stat that you
Okay,
say
so
all the time.
one of the things I tell folks, and they're always surprised by this, is I've been fired 3.5 times. And I say to folks, I've been fired, okay? Let go, goodbye, sack, see you later. Not I'm looking for other opportunities, I'm exploring my options. People have all kinds of euphemisms they use for getting fired.
Right.
And then I compared myself to some really famous people who have also been fired, like Anna Wintour, Mike Bloomberg, Joe Torre. Joe Torre was fired from the Atlanta Braves, and then 8 years later he had 4 World Series rings. So but the other thing I say, I'm not successful like Steve Jobs was fired. I'm not successful like those folks are. However, I'm better at them than getting fired, because they've been fired once. I've been fired 3.5 times. So on one dimension, I'm superior to all those folks that I
always
mentioned.
love the half part of that, but that's a deeper story. We'll get into that another time.
If you want to. Yeah.
But I think through the whole process of being fired, that's pretty dramatic, right? But you always reflect back that it's a learning moment, or a way that you were able to build better strength.
Look, I'm not saying it was pleasant. It wasn't. Each time was a challenge. Even the last time. One thing I didn't talk about in the keynote I'll share now is, once it's happened to you, you kind of get a resolution. You're strengthened for it. So the next time is a lot easier, which really gets back to the core issue, which is resilience. Like, how is it that you're able to take, and like those people and myself, that's one link, other than we're all Homo sapiens, but the link between having that experience and then being able to actually grow and improve from it.
Right. So resilience is such a loaded term, right?
Yeah.
But it really is. There are some scientific backgrounds to this whole concept of resilience. So explain that a little bit for us.
Sure. So believe it or not, there is scientific discovery or research behind it. I had the privilege of working for Dr. Dennis Charney. Dr. Dennis Charney, until a few months ago, was the dean of the Icahn School of Medicine. He had been one of the longest, if not the longest serving dean, 18 years as dean, and he took Icahn Mount Sinai from good to great. In his spare time, he also was pursuing an academic interest of his called resilience. He and a partner he worked with started to look into the question, why do some people are able to succeed after a bad event and not? And is there learning there? So they actually did research, and again, something I wasn't able to share during the keynote. They actually talked to POWs from Vietnam. They went in and they interviewed them in depth, including John McCain, but others. because as a group, they were tremendously successful after having been through that experience. So the experience didn't break them. In a way, it made them, into who they became. And he said to a person, they all said as horrible as the experience was, being able to come out of it made them stronger and better and led to more success. So he actually came up with this formula: stress plus anxiety equals personal growth.
Wow.
They started a center for it that's now, since he retired, not retired, he resigned. He's not retired, he's still active. But there's the Charney Center for Stress, Anxiety, and Personal Growth at Icahn, Mount Sinai, to delve into this. And so I'm not equating, look, losing your job is one of the most stressful.
Yeah.
It's not POW,
right.
It's not death, it's not, it's a lot of things worse than that. But it's pretty challenging.
Yeah.
And yet you can learn from it and grow from it. And as painful as it always was when I went through it, it's been true each and every time.
Yeah. And, there are other things, too, that enable resilience in your organization. Not even just getting fired, right? There are ups and downs. We've been through the pandemic.
Yeah.
We've been through a variety of things.
Yeah.
The industry itself stress tests us
Absolutely.
all
It's
the time.
always throwing stuff at you.
Always.
And you always have to respond. And the people who can respond best are the ones who really do well. So it's true. It sounds crazy. Strength, anxiety equals personal growth, but it's absolutely true.
I love that formula because I've always found that way too. I've been fired a number of times,
yes.
Admittedly, right? I understand how that works. But you always use that. I think the other term you use is like it's a learning moment, right?
Yeah.
It's a moment where you can learn from what happened. Of course, you have to let it wash over you.
Yeah.
But then you learn, and from that learning, you can develop and grow. Other people have said, like, when you failures are learning opportunities, right?
Right.
And in healthcare, particularly in healthcare marketing, this is something we have to learn from all the time.
Right. Well, going back to the great Dr. Charney, one other thing he says, you explain in the area of research, right? They call them clinical trials because we don't know if they're going to work.
Yeah.
Right. And he said to his students, he'd say, if you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough.
Oh.
That was one of his favorite phrases.
Uh-huh.
Again, leading back to the idea of resilience and leading back to always learning. So what I tried to talk about in the talk was the key phrase there is to not be afraid, to be willing to take the risks. And then also, whatever negative experiences you have, try to use them as growth opportunities. And that sounds very glib and it's easy to say, and that's not to undermine at all the emotional, really, in some ways, trauma, if that's not too excessive a word to use, that going through something like that is. But again, it can be it can be a springboard for
and
better
our
things.
industry sometimes is averse to taking risks.
Yes.
Right? And failing.
Yes.
I remember when I first came into healthcare marketing, and I said, well, that's a good failure, and everyone looked at me like I was calling something, like calling them a bad name.
Yeah.
Because you can't fail in healthcare. I think that's a bleed over from how physicians look at the concept of failure in clinical practice.
Well, I mean, that's one of the things that makes physicians so extraordinary. They can deal in that world where, let's face it, a certain kind of failure can mean, death. I mean, it can be that extreme. So the aversion to that is absolutely, totally understandable and very real. But I've said to people, in the realm of what we do, as important as I think what we do is, if I miss a deadline on something, it'll go out later, right? No one's going to be hurt by it, that kind of thing. But one of my other themes in the talk, and I ended with this, is marketing saves lives. And I say that because we're putting people together with the care that they need.
Right.
And I told a little story about somebody came up to me and said, you saved my life. And I said, no, I didn't save your life. It's the people we put you in touch with. But I think we could all have that kind of story and realize that what we do, no, I'm not doing heart surgery, I'm not curing cancer, but we are helping people get the care they need, which is really, really, really motivating.
I want to get back to the concept of physicians are a different breed than marketers, because you brought up something on stage. You even had a Myers-Briggs comparison. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I'd always hypothesized that the reason we have trouble talking to each other, marketing people, communications people, and physicians, is that they probably think differently than we do. And it occurred to me, gee, I wonder if we could use some measurement or some way. And so, thank you, ChatGPT. I asked them, what's the Myers-Briggs profile for the average marketer and the average physician? Okay. And sure enough, it turned out my hypothesis was correct. There isn't a single dimension that's the same. They are. I'm not gonna, I think they're IN for something, and so they're introverts and we're extroverts, and they're thinkers and we're perceivers. I forget the I didn't memorize it, but yeah, it's true. They, on average, think differently than we do. So you have to take that into account. And I gave a couple of hints. For example, show them solutions, not selections. If you're going to be having a program, make sure each one meets your strategic goals. Uh-huh. You can't show them stuff and say, oh, here's, and I've actually seen people do it. Here's a bunch, which one do you like, doctor?
Right.
Without really, and not having the rigor to say, I'm only going to show them the stuff that really makes sense and that is on strategy and has an executional, whether it's a web posting or a website or a social media or a brochure or an ad or whatever it is. You want to make sure that you've done your homework and that everything meets the criteria, because sure enough, they'll pick the thing. Another thing I say to people is physicians, and again, these are generalizations. Yeah. Physicians don't visualize, so you have to. They believe what they see. They're perceived. They want to. Whatever Myers-Briggs that says, I believe what I see. Uh-huh. That's where they're at. Uh-huh. So again, you have to take that into account. Because we as marketers, we can visualize, we can think of different things, but they find that very, very difficult. And
they're receptive to that, right?
Yeah.
So seeing it mapped out, this will cause this, and you kind of lay it out for them visually, so they can understand the strategy.
And then another clue I had: make sure you're always collaborative. You don't go to them and say, I've got an MD too, a marketing degree. That doesn't go.
Wow, that's bold if you said that.
No, I wouldn't say that. I've heard people kind of talk. Yeah, I've got an MD. I got a marketing degree. Yeah, no, that's not the way to approach it. So you want to approach them very, 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 not deferential so much as respectful.
Yes,
it's very important to do that.
I think all of these are really great lessons to learn. I mean, I know there's many more. We're shortcutting a lot of these. We only have a few minutes today.
Yeah.
But David, it's always great to chat with you because, even when you're this perspective of talking to doctors, you have to develop your own resilience to them.
Yeah.
A few burnouts from them too. Yeah. That were emotional.
But it's also very rewarding to work with those folks. I've done it, like I said, about almost 30 years now. Yeah. And I've enjoyed it. I love doctors. I think they're amazing people. But they're different, and so you just have to recognize that.
But that's what makes this industry so much better, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thanks for spending a few minutes with me today.
It's always a pleasure, Chris. You're the best. Really enjoyed it.
You're the best. I would say I wish you another continued 30 years, but I don't think you're going to go that long.
I don't know. Well, if medicine advances,
maybe
it'll be agentic Dave.
Yeah, maybe we'll make an agentic David Feinberg.
Oh my God! God forbid. All right.
Anyway,
thanks a lot,
you.
Chris. Thank you.